coming here. They're waiting at the edge of the city. They're peering around buildings at night. And they're waiting. They're waiting for you. And they'll take you one by one, and no one will hear you scream. No one will hear you scream!
Before we get into the commentary, let's take a look at some newsprint ads for the original theatrical exhibition of Messiah of Evil. The earliest I could find it playing was December 13th, 1974 in Paris, Texas. This special late show sneak preview world premiere. I couldn't find it playing anywhere before this, so we're just going to go with that as true for our purposes tonight. The rest of the original theatrical exhibition rolled out in 1975, beginning with Louisiana and also Raleigh, North Carolina in January of that year. This beautiful ad campaign that they designed for it. It was ripped off later by Last House Part 2 and a couple other things. Here it is playing in Salt Lake City in October that year for Halloween weekend with Cult of the Damned, which sounds like it might be an AKA for this movie, but instead it is actually the 1974 Giallo, The Perfume of the Lady in Black. The Flesh and Blood Show was another movie that Messiah was often exhibited with. Here it is in Phoenix and Long Beach in April of 75 with that movie. And don't they go perfectly together? Now here's the most audacious thing. Return of the Living Dead. Yes, this was actually Messiah of Evil, marketed as a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead, including the original film's ad campaign. But look closely. The tagline is the tagline from the as yet unreleased Dawn of the Dead. Yes, Dawn had not even come out in the States at this time in 1978. And these distributors were really gutsy to do this. They just jumped right in front of Romero and Rubinstein. Well, they got a legal injunction to get the title changed so that it didn't look like a sequel to Night, and that they were forced to stop using their iconic tagline that they had written for their brilliant movie. So here is the title that has been changed for Messiah of Evil to Revenge of the Screaming Dead, which really does not make a whole lot of sense, but not much involving this movie does. Night of the Damned was also another title that they used after the injunction, and it stuck around for 79 and 80. Look at this gorgeous ad. I just love it. It looks like it could be an ad for Evil Dead. Also, that grasping zombie hand reminds me of Don't Open the Window. But they weren't done yet. Dead People was another title that they rolled out for this. December of 1981 in Miami is the first place I found Dead People. And look at that groovy font that they came up with, the logo. Exploitation film marketing at its finest. What a wonderful movie under any name. Messiah of Evil. And if you feel like having a cocktail, Sam Panico has a suggestion for you.
To make the Pointe Dune Beachcomber, all you need is 1.5 ounces of light rum, a 1/2 ounce of triple sec, a 1/2 ounce of grenadine, a 1/2 ounce of simple syrup, and a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. When you're cutting up to make that lemon juice, just keep a wedge and rim your glass with it. And then pour some sugar onto a plate and then just gradually rim the glass. It's really simple. Finally, just put all the ingredients in a shaker, shake them up, set your dad on fire instead of burying him, strain it into a glass, and then you have a drink to enjoy this movie with, which definitely doesn't need a drink. But hey, if you got one, it makes it go down even smoother.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Van Ryn from fanzine Drive-In Asylum.
And I'm Sam from BNS About Movies.
We're going to do this commentary on one of our favorite films, Messiah of Evil.
And that's the first in hopefully a long series of commentaries here.
So who is that, Sam?
Who is that? Is that Walter Hill there?
That's Walter Hill.
Yeah. Way before Walter Hill made Streets of Fire and lots of other movies. Notice I would pick Streets of Fire the first, obviously. You could tell I'm a little stranger. I've always loved the lighting of this scene because I think it really sets up the suburban nature of this film, that this isn't... this nightmare exists within a place that is somewhere that you're in every day. This isn't a fantasy land or like a gothic Roger Corman world. That this is our world.
And yet not. There's something very artificial about all of the places in this movie.
It's very California. That's the way I always see it, that this is a California folk horror.
Absolutely. It can happen anywhere, but especially LA.
Yeah. Any of the times I spent in small towns outside of LA, like Pomona and stuff, I always feel that they're very much this movie. And there we go. Very, perhaps influenced by Night of the Living Dead there in the beginning with the child raising a weapon.
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
So V&M Productions is one of the two companies I've seen that carry this. The other is Interscene Film Corp is the other one that kind of gave some money to this. And I've read that they had a son that wanted to be a race driver and said they tried to install him as a producer. Have you heard that story?
No.
Yeah.
But I totally believe it.
What's funny is, like, I love the beginning of this movie, and I know that most movies that have a voiceover inserted in the beginning of them, like Blade Runner, are usually considered horrible to have that voiceover to explain things. But I love this beginning. Like, there's a lot of accidents that work in this movie that shouldn't, the way that it's been put together.
Yeah, I'm not disappointed at all with how this movie turned out, and we'll talk a little bit later about the problems that it had with production. But I think every bad thing that happened to the production worked out in its benefit.
Yeah, sometimes those like weird accidents are like whims of fate that make this movie better. And I think you don't have to know that some of these things got inserted and added and weren't meant to be in it originally.
There used to be a theme song attached to this film. When it was originally released, there was a folk song by Rowan McKinnon.
Hold On to Love.
But I guess, that was put on there by the distributors and not the filmmakers themselves. So now that it's been revived and remastered, they took it off. Bummer.
Yeah.
This is the lovely Mariana Hill that we're seeing. And she's in so many fabulous films, The Baby.
Of course.
Our go-to movie to mention about Mariana is The Baby, but of course she was in Godfather 2 and High Plains Drifter.
Schizoid. Schizoid, I'll say it wrong.
Jack Fisk.
Yeah.
Mr. Sissy Spacek.
Yeah. Astral Factor. Blood Beach. Death at Love House with a pretty fun TV movie. And she's in a really pretty well-regarded Star Trek episode, too, Dagger of the Mind.
She did a film with Elvis.
Oh, really? What Elvis movie is she in?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that.
Oh.
I can't pull it out of the air. I didn't even talk that much to her about it. I interviewed Mariana Hill for an early issue of Drive-In Asylum, and she was very gracious. She talked to me for about 5 hours.
I think the interesting thing about this movie, too, is like it really... Maybe it's my love of the early 70s, but every female character in this is fabulous in her own way. They all have their own fashion sense, but they're all individually fabulous. Actually, everybody kind of is in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody is at once uniquely individual, and then you'll see other characters that they look like they're all part of a strange cult. They all have the same demeanor and affect.
It's really strange. I think today, there's so many gas station chains and, Sheetz and Wawa and all these things open across the country that, are open all night. In the early 70s, there weren't places that were open all night. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you could get stranded somewhere and be out of gas, and the breaks. You got to wait till morning.
And where you ended up, if there's just an attendant firing a gun randomly into the night, that's what you deal with, right?
This gas station where they filmed this part, the owner was extremely racist,
Ah,
and they set up the catering inside or near the gas station, and I guess it was an all-white catering crew, and
Oh,
he
wow.
made them set up across the street if they wanted to keep filming.
well, what's amazing when you consider this movie is only 7 or 8 years outside of integration, right?
Yeah, this was filmed in 71.
Oh, okay, so yeah, even closer, yeah.
It didn't come out theatrically until early 74. Well, late 73. Or maybe it was 74. Yeah, I think it was late 74 when it finally was released.
And a ton of titles, right? I'm sure you've gone through them in the beginning but it was shot under the title Blood Virgin was one of the titles it was shot under.
Blood Virgin?
Yeah, that's in Nightmare USA. He discusses that was like one of the titles they were discussing, but a lot of people thought it was going to be a porn movie, so they said maybe let's not use that.
Well, another reason they thought it was a porn movie is one of the other titles was The Second Coming.
Oh yeah, that's right. Not the Alice Cooper song.
Draw your own conclusions
Yeah.
about that. Mariana told me that they filmed it under the title Blood Moon.
That's a good title too. Messiah of Evil is obviously the best title of all the titles. I like Dead People too. Is a pretty good one. And Deep Swamp, was that the European VHS title?
Yeah, that makes absolutely no sense.
You're in maybe that's like a French term, like we're in a deep swamp here.
One of the strangest alternate titles that it has is Return of the Living Dead.
Yes.
There was a distributor in 78 who decided to reissue this as a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And not only that, he completely ripped off the original films or Night of the Living Dead's ad campaign and the tagline from the as yet unreleased Dawn of the Dead, which was when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. They went there.
It's funny because, like, as we'll see later in the movie, especially during one scene, this movie really pre-configures Dawn of the Dead's zombies as consumers analog before, obviously, many years before. And because of the lawsuit, one can argue that George Romero definitely saw this movie or was aware of it.
I think it was Richard Rubinstein that became aware of it. He was the more litigious. But
Of the Laurel folks.
yeah. They stopped the distribution of this movie as Return of the Living Dead. I think that's the director, William Huck, in the car.
I found a really great quote from him about this movie, that this was his view of the San Fernando Valley. And he's like, that bleak high street that you walk up, if you walk through the valley at night, this movie is what you see. And that's kind of like what he was trying to bring to this film. At one point, when I was in Los Angeles, we were driving back and forth with one of my roommates, old roommates from college, lives out there. And we went across like these oceans where they're on both sides of the highway on that Pacific Coast Highway. And it really feels like such an alien world compared to Los Angeles. That kind of, once you leave Los Angeles, you're in this world of these small dotted towns that don't have much in them. And these coastal towns, and it feels like you're way away from civilization. I really think that that's another thing that this movie captures really well.
This house is interesting. This is the house that was used in Mildred Pierce.
Ah,
It was Monty Barragun's beach house in Mildred Pierce. And if you've seen Mildred Pierce,
yes.
it's where I know you've seen it. It's where, the murder takes place. You can really tell that lattice work is in this outer part of it is almost identical in Mildred Pierce. It didn't change very much. The house was on unstable footing, and eventually it just fell into the ocean. There was a TV crew filming at the time when it happened. I think this was in 1983. There was a news crew, and there was one of those weather reports from outside in a storm, and they were filming it. And the the anchor was like, "Yeah, this house behind me is in danger of falling into the ocean," and it did right there.
Oh my gosh. The house from Messiah of Evil, aka Dead People, is about to fall into the ocean.
Unfortunately, the inside, the interiors that we see with all the paintings and everything, that this is not the beach house.
Yeah. In the inside of this house really feels like its own reality, and very much a lot of the Italian movies of this time seem to have similar, like almost like pop art and comic book based kind of backgrounds in their apartments.
Yeah.
And like I react incredibly strongly to this. I want this house to be a place that I can go explore and actually live in today, because it is as much a character in this movie as any of the characters.
It's beautiful. I'd be interested to see what the house looked like before they painted all these murals, because it's so disorienting with all the different angles that the murals on the walls add.
And they had talked about at one point of actually having characters step out of the murals, but I don't think that happened in time. They weren't able to get those shots. But that's what I kind of like about it. It feels like at any point one of those people could just walk off the wall and into their world.
Possibly a reference to Psycho with the stuffed owl.
There's another Hitchcock reference in here too, right? To the birds later on.
Absolutely. Well, Willard Huck and Gloria Katz, they had gotten this gig. They were film students, and they actually wrote an early treatment of American Graffiti for George Lucas. And then he liked it so much he asked them to write the script. But they had already gotten the opportunity to make their own movie, and the funders were like, "Well, you can make your own movie, but it has to be a horror movie." And they said, "Okay, we will." So they wrote Messiah of Evil. They left American Graffiti to make this movie, and by the time they were finished making Messiah of Evil, American Graffiti still had not completed production, and they did write another script for George Lucas after they made Messiah.
It's funny because at this point, I think today we've talked about this before on the show, but horror wasn't yet at a place where it was very ghettoized at this point. But also, if you wanted to make a low budget movie, that was the way to make money. Obviously, that's why Night of the Living Dead happened, because horror is going to sell, and this will as well.
Nobody expected Night of the Living Dead to be so influential and popular, but that was one of the most influential things about it, is just the fact that it was an independent film, and it had been made on a very low budget, and it had a huge return.
I love, obviously, this is Royal Dano speaking here in this scene, and I think his voiceovers work really well within this, because to me this is very much the Lovecraftian part of it, where a narrator has gone insane as a result of the things that they've seen.
Yeah.
And then his insanity starts to infect the people that read or experience his art or within his art. I'm a big fan of movies. There's multiple genres happening in this movie, but movies where art becomes a destructive force, or contains a virus or something like that. I'm really obsessed with those kind of movies too. I think Tenebrae is one where art kills people, is another one that I think of a lot. This is a gorgeous shot here. This is one of the more frightening shots here as we see all that fog come in. And it's literally, the beach is another world from when the last time we saw it.
Mariana told me that when they hired her for this film, they told her they were really into French filmmakers. As if you couldn't tell by the artsy way that this movie is shot. They really wanted to make something that was similar to a French film, an art movie, and they told her that they wanted a character that they were calling her character Arletty, and there's a French actress named Arletty, and Mariana had never seen any of her films, because back then it wasn't so easy to just see whatever you wanted to see. And she said, so I just started creating this persona in my mind of who Arletty was, and who was this French actress. So that's kind of her inspiration for this character, Arletty.
It's pretty amazing. So if you went to the drive-in or to a theater to see Return of the Living Dead expecting a zombie movie, I mean, you'll get some of that within this, but then you're like, wait, I didn't know I was going to the art cinema. I'm like getting something with completely different sensibilities for its budget. And I always believe there's like that weird line between, depending on what theater you see a movie in, it's either an art movie or a grindhouse movie, and sometimes they're right on the line of it. I think
This is a great example.
This
of
is
that.
probably the best example of it. You could see it either way.
The blind art dealer. She reminds me of Elida Valley in Lisa and the Devil.
Yeah. Let's say there's some Italian horror sensibilities, or Euro horror, obviously, sensibilities in this as well. I love this this hotel.
It's probably still there.
We should, an on-set cinema. Everybody goes.
I'm as old as the hills. Mama delivered me herself. She took me from between her legs.
This is Elisa Cook Jr.
Alicia,
and he was at the time the last surviving member of the Maltese Falcon. He's in that cast, but he's in a ton of stuff. Obviously, he lived. What's strange is he lived in a mountain cabin way away from Hollywood, and they would send a courier whenever they wanted him in a movie. He was a big hunter and fisherman, and he really hated to live within Los Angeles. And he would only come to the city to be in movies. Obviously, he's Mr. Nichols from Rosemary's Baby. He's in Shane, Blackula.
Blackula is the one I remember him most from.
Night Slaves, Night Stalker, Phantom of Hollywood. He's in Salem's Lot. He's Weasel.
Yeah.
Gordon Phillips, yeah. So he's really in a lot of stuff, but he's really evocative in this. And everybody was really excited to have somebody in this movie that was on the set of Maltese Falcon.
Oh, could you imagine?
Yeah.
He said that was the night that he lost religion.
Here comes Joy Bang.
Joy Bang.
One of the other folks I interviewed for Drive-In Asylum was Linda Gillen,
Yeah.
who was in Terror House. And one of the happiest memories I have of that interview is when I started talking to her about, she told me just casually, she was like, oh, at that time I was living in California with Joy Bang.
And you're like, oh my
And
God.
I was like, you were roommates with Joy Bang? And I said, she was like, how do you know Joy Bang? And I said, she's in Messiah of Evil. And Linda just lit up. She said, that was the movie I was going to be in.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, what? And she was up for this role. She auditioned for Willard and Gloria, and they asked her to be in the movie. And at first she agreed, but then she got Terror House, and she said, I thought Terror House would be a better movie. So I passed on Messiah. And she was living with Joy Bang at the time. She said, why don't you go audition for Willard and Gloria? Because I just left their movie.
I think that's amazing because I think Terror House feels somewhat adjacent to this movie. Maybe it's just because I know that, but also it has a feeling of it. Joy's also in Play It Again, Sam, and Night of the Cobra Woman, which I'm sure you can guess that I love that movie.
With Marlena Clark.
Yep, exactly.
Love her.
Yeah, and she really didn't do anything after 1973. She's in Maidstone, Pretty Maids All in a Row.
Yes.
Cisco Pike, and she was in an episode of Adam 12 in 1973.
Of course, these two. Michael Greer.
Yeah.
He was in The Magic Garden of Stanley's Sweetheart.
Yep.
I think that was his first theatrical film. He was known as a stage actor, and he was doing Fortune in Men's Eyes, directed by Sal Mineo.
Yeah.
With Don Johnson. And they both got hired to do Magic Garden of Stanley's Sweetheart. This was right afterwards that he was in Messiah of Evil. And he was also a very well-known drag queen.
He did a lot of, obviously, he did Tallulah Bankhead, and he actually did an entire album of her in character called Tallulah in Heaven that came out. And then, obviously, Betty Davis, because he ended up dubbing for her in, Dark Secret of Harvest Home and Wicked Stepmother.
Wicked Stepmother, especially, because, unfortunately, she passed away really early in the production.
Yeah. And one of his other acts was he did a Mona Lisa act. He
Yeah.
literally would get a painting of Mona Lisa with just his head sticking out of it, and do an entire routine where he would answer questions as Mona Lisa. And he
Yeah.
did an entire album about it as Mona Lisa. And he did a lot of gay cruises. He's obviously a gay actor. I mean, that's fine. Of course it's fine.
Are you okay with that,
I'm
Sam?
completely fine. No, but I mean, at the time, the reason why I say it like that, at the time, it was very detrimental to his career.
Yeah.
And obviously, we have to keep in mind this is 1971.
Sure, yeah.
And,
it wasn't like it is today.
Yeah, and he had developed a screenplay about Richard Speck and really tried for years to get it made, and felt that he was kind of held back from that because of his sexual orientation. But that's why he really went towards doing more cabaret shows and stand up. And he was referred to in an article as the gay Jonathan Winters, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think Jonathan Winters, he's quite the paragon of masculinity.
Yeah, exactly. I was
himself.
like, how far do you have to go to be there? And obviously, the last of our little cast here is Anitra Ford.
Anitra Ford, yeah. The stunning Anitra Ford. I love everything she's in.
Yeah.
She's just fabulous.
A former Price is Right girl.
Right.
Yeah, for what, 3 or 4 years. And she's in, obviously, I can guess your favorite movie that she's in.
Invasion of the Bee Girls.
Yeah. Mine is Stacy, which is the Andy Sedaris movie that he remade as Malibu Express. But it's Andy Sedaris' second movie.
Yeah.
First narrative movie. He made a movie, The Racing Scene, with James Garner about James Garner's racing team. Then he did that. She's also in The Big Birdcage, which I'm sure you...
Big Birdcage, yeah.
Yeah. The Longest Yard.
She was at the very beginning of The Longest Yard. She didn't have a real big part in that.
And she's in The Love Machine.
Unfortunately.
And The Oscar, which is an insane movie with Tony Bennett.
You're about to see she has quite a way with a hairdryer. This is one of my favorite parts of the film. Could you imagine waking up and hearing something like this, and it turns out these people that you just met yesterday shacking up in a motel room are now in your home?
Yeah, they've all just ended up in your house. Also, the other thing that's kind of astounding about this movie, I realize that we're right on the cusp of porno chic here, but the relationships of these characters are kind of left up to you. Do you know what I mean? Is he with both women? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's their story? Obviously, he ends up, with our lead, but it's like kind of all just kind of loosey-goosey,
Yeah.
as they say. And this is one of my theories, is this movie's obviously coming at the end of the free love 60s, before the me decade, right? And before the 70s, when kind of everybody has this big come down post Watergate, and trying to figure out, who they are. But this is like kind of the end of that post Alderman, post Manson kind of darkness in California feel. There's a lot of fooling with your brain here too, with especially the as we look behind her when we see that escalator. There's a depth in the scene that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's what I mean. Like, I would like to see what it looked like before they painted all this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's probably just a garage.
Yeah, it's hard to get a sense of how big the space is because the perspective makes it feel huge. And then sometimes, like that dog statue, are things on the wall, or are they 3D, or are they not 3D? And it kind of plays with you a little bit there.
And see, there we have people that all look the same.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost their individuality. Her other uninvited guest.
Joy Bang coming back in. There's a movie called The Similars from Spain that is similar to that, but it's about a bus station where every single person that comes into it ends up becoming the same person. Even babies and children, they all start to get mustaches and start to look like the same person. It's like literally a disease that causes it.
I don't understand why she let them stay either, but we wouldn't have a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad she did. This dinner scene is amazing. Like, who made all this food, for one thing?
Where did they find the food?
This is a pretty elaborate meal that I mean, they didn't have Uber Eats or anything.
Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting about this movie, I think, is that they weren't, obviously we'll be getting into it later, but the ending was never shot, and the Tom is originally, when he did an interview, right, and he said, I'm playing the son of the devil
Yeah.
in this movie, but that's not really set up either.
You only know that if you've read up on it, if you've researched it a little bit.
Yeah.
You certainly can't determine that from watching the movie.
Yeah. What I kind of love, and like I said about the accidents that make this movie, is this is one of those movies that there's enough open within it that you can make it be about what you want it to be about. Like, you can fill in those like gray areas yourself, and I think that there's a few other movies like this. This would probably be the best example of a movie like this that holds together, and you can still fill in some of the unfilled in areas yourself.
Yeah, there is a little bit there because you can obviously tell that it's Michael Greer that is on that horse that the stranger rides, and at the end where he walks out of the ocean, and that's where she loses him, in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So she loses him in the ocean, and then he walks out as this other character.
How many other women do you think have been seduced by this trio? Do you know what I mean? Men and women. Do you know what I mean? They go like town to town, like finding strange art women and creating elaborate meals for them.
They really needed their own movie.
I would love if they had their own Netflix series. We're just like, let's follow them around, right? Let's get on that. Let's kickstart that.
We know their throuple ended in doom, but
Yeah.
what happened before that?
Yeah.
They had to have some good times.
I mean, Butch and Sundance may have died, but we still had a prequel movie made after
The
that.
early days.
The early days. Not a good movie, but you know.
Tony, Tom, and Laura.
The
Early days.
John the Baptist of evil, not the Messiah of evil.
I do love the electronic score.
Yeah. It really works for this movie. Who did the score for this?
Phil Bishop.
Because I actually read today that he did more than just this movie. He did several movies.
He did the eerie electronic scores for Kiss of the Tarantula and The Severed Arm, as well as Messiah of Evil. Also, I didn't get an opportunity to mention when his credit was up on screen. One of the producers of this film was James P. Graham. He was a Texas-based producer who also was behind the 1973 film Horror High, starring Pat Carty and Austin Stoker, among many other wonderful people. But James P. Graham also was behind this movie, Messiah of Evil, which is kind of interesting. He was a film producer who made it big in the oil industry. He had several oil wells drilling, and eventually one of them struck a huge deposit of oil in Texas and made him a very rich man. Also, around the time that this movie was made, he was married to Rosie Holitik, who starred in Horror High and also S.F. Brownrigg's film Don't Look in the Basement. She does not appear in Messiah of Evil.
No. I'm sure you could have done it yourself.
I love this like hee-haw style music that's suddenly playing.
There's trouble in paradise, as it were, or hell, the opposite of paradise.
I love Mariana's hair.
She is well known for her different hairstyles in movies, huh?
Well, the one they gave her in The Baby was ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. I think about it often when I'm sad. I think how wonderful her hair was.
Mariana's hair.
Yeah, how wonderful her hair was in The Baby, and it just instantly makes me happy.
She got to look really nice in this movie.
Yeah. I want this tub or what, this shower thing. It's really great.
That's probably a nightmare.
Oh, draining it and whatnot. Yeah. How long have they been there? I know it's never established. But does time even exist within this town?
It couldn't be any more than a couple of days.
Yeah. And why are they there? Are they there to like they're tape recording interviews with bums? And is he an art seller? Like, there's a lot of questions, I guess, that probably I shouldn't even worry about asking.
Well, he says he's a collector of legends, and
Yeah.
he there's a legend about this place, about the blood moon and the stranger. So he's come there to ask people like Alicia Cook Jr. what it was like back in the day.
I love the framing here where her face fits into that crowd for a second while she's talking to her.
It's an interesting decor to have for your bathroom.
Yeah.
When you're on the throne, you're sitting in the bleachers.
Yeah, you're being judged by a jury of your peers. Well, I'm going out.
She's like, forget you. I'm taking the dope. I sure would. Oh, she tries to steal the car here.
Is this Mariana's car here that she's trying to steal?
No, I think it's Tom's car.
Okay, because Mariana's car was owned by the editor Morgan Fisher, the associate editor. They used his car for the production. Anytime you see the moon in a movie, you know something bad's gonna happen. Obviously.
For those of you who may not own it, you should look up issue number 9 of Drive-In Asylum. Not only do we have that interview with Mariana Hill that I did in that issue, but also Bradley Steele Harding did a great interview with Anitra Ford. And she talks a lot about this movie, and she's very positive about it. Mariana was too. Mm-hmm. Mariana felt a little burned that the project just came to a sudden halt. And we can talk about that later, but Anitra is really into the film, like, you know, its reputation as a cult film, the fact that people are finally appreciating it years after its original debut, and she loved the sense of art and the artistry that went into making it. And she said she had this backstory that she had created for Laura, is that she was formerly a call girl, and that she had hooked up with this European, I think he's supposed to be a count. I don't know, some
level of royalty. Yeah,
lower level of royalty. So everybody was committed to their roles here, except maybe Joy Bang. She doesn't seem too committed. No offense.
One of the funny things here is this pronunciation of Wagner. Me making fun of pronunciation,
Yeah.
right? But they obviously,
we better not go there.
Yeah, but they knew that it was wrong, and they just thought it was funny and left it in the movie.
Benny Robertson, I think, is that guy's name.
And that is Jack Fisk's. Yeah, it is. And that's Jack Fisk's truck, the art
Oh.
director of the movie.
Right on.
Even the little creatures. I found a lot of them.
A lot of what?
Beach rats.
There's a V scene coming up here.
I love how chill this mouse is. Like, it's not trying to get away or anything.
With them, I eat them. That's what I do with them.
awkward conversations when picked up.
There's a crunch.
No, thank you. I'm just gonna get out right here.
The extras in this movie are, this may be urban legend, but are supposedly unemployed NASA workers.
Yeah.
Maybe that speaks something to the drone-like nature of who they are.
Yeah, it was a downturn at the time for aerospace workers, and a lot of them weren't employed.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd been to the moon at this point. They were just like, yeah, we've done it. We got as far as we're going to get.
Oh, this neon motel sign.
I love it. And the coffee. It's just, man, a better time.
You can say that again.
Yeah.
I remember motels like that. Oh,
Yeah.
look at that hanging lamp. I have definite furniture anxiety when I watch this.
Yeah.
Furniture envy.
When I was a kid, I would see movies like this, and I thought, when I'm an adult, I'm going to go to hotels like this. And now they're almost all gone, or they're frightening places. There's a Night's Inn that I stayed in near Penn State once that was a really frightening experience. We were drinking in the bar, and someone passed my girlfriend at the time a note that said, "We want to party with just her," and she was like, "We gotta go."
Oh my God.
Do not want to stay here tonight.
Creepy.
Yeah, it was clumsily handwritten too. Like very. She's like, she slept with a knife under her pillow all night. This is what I was getting to earlier about some of the consumerism that kind of comes into Dawn of the Dead. Obviously, it's within this movie too. That, you know, this like kind of dead store. You know, the world is closed for the night, and except for one place. A Ralph's, which we don't obviously have in Pittsburgh, but they're still around. They're in Vegas and Los Angeles still. And I would be afraid to go to a Ralph's after this movie.
They're not very friendly in Ralph's.
No, they're not. That's also, the outside of that store is beautiful. There's still some architecture in like Youngstown, Ohio, like that. I was just there yesterday, and like, so that weird 50s, mid-century kind of madman buildings. That's how I always think of them.
Yeah.
Before every store looked exactly the same and have the same aisles and the same products. I love this scene just because of just how scattered the store. No store would look like this today. It's kind of a Dress to Kill moment where she thinks she's following somebody and someone else is following her.
She's being stalked.
Yeah.
They didn't use any of their own lighting inside the store. This is all the lighting of the store itself.
Wow.
They used to shoot this.
I wonder how much color correction went into it, because a lot of the, sometimes like the tungsten lights and stuff would adjust the skin tones.
It does, but maybe that's what they wanted. They wanted something that would look really, unreal.
Yeah.
This is one of the peak moments in the film.
Do you think that they all just kind of get together? It's kind of like church. They just all randomly show up at Ralph's in the middle of the night, the only place open, and consume
raw meat. Are they going to pay for that? Have things gotten that bad?
Yeah.
That they're not even going to pay?
There's some really great editing in this sequence for a movie that wasn't completely edited by the people that made the movie. But this scenes of them running forward, the moving across the aisles. You can see the pickup shots in the B-roll and within this are really well used.
Those shots of her feet on the floor mat there, that was actually Gloria Katz.
Oh,
I
really?
believe. They thought of that later.
Those are called Ziegler doors, the old doors that you would step on and they would open. Because I grew up next to the guy that invented it.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, they would have like a Z on the door and the pressure, before we got the electric eye ones, but the pressurized ones. This scene is very disquieting because I like how it cuts from her in the aisle to blankness, from her in the aisle to blankness, and then it's just over. Like, you don't see the gore, and it allows you to build it within your head.
There never was any more gore that was edited out that doesn't survive anymore. This is all there was. I remember back when I was first discovering this film, and there were people talking about it on internet message boards. And they're like, "Oh yeah, like it was gory, but they cut all of it out." But that really isn't true. It's just an implication. It works.
I think that they're at a place so far away from civilization now that even radios don't work. That they've kind of like been enveloped by this like shadow world of, the Dark Stranger and his followers.
Very Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
An obvious influence, and I think Willard Huck even talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. It's
That's why I'm glad you
Huyck.
said it before me.
Hoik.
Yeah. And obviously, as we hear this voiceover, we're going to meet him in a bit. That's Royal Dano's voice, and man, he's been in a ton of things. He was on Gunsmoke 13 times.
Another legendary actor.
Yeah.
That's in this.
And his death scene in The Red Badge of Courage was actually cut out by John Huston. It was so intense and so well acted that when they did the first screening, people got so upset that they walked out halfway through the movie. So it's taken out, and supposedly it was lost after it was cut. And John Huston would remark in later interviews that that's one of the things he wished he had kept in his movies because it was such powerful acting. And he's also the voice of Abraham Lincoln when you go to the Hall of the Presidents in Disney World. His voice was taken out but then brought back after his death. And he's in a ton of other stuff, obviously, Bill. Moon of the Wolf, In Search of Historic Jesus. He plays a prophet.
In Search of Historic Jesus.
He's, my wife, Becca, would want me to say, most importantly, he's in Gramson House, too. And he's also the old man in the beginning of Killer Clowns, Space Invaders, Ghoulies, and he shows up in Twin Peaks, which this movie feels like it could be part of the Twin Peaks universe a bit at times.
I think they're still searching for historic Jesus.
If only Sun Classics were still... What Sun Classics created with those movies is now just everything on basic cable is the Sun Classics formula. I guess they got out of that bed swing. They knocked it to the floor with their tempestuous lovemaking.
She chooses to sleep right there.
Yeah.
As opposed, there has to be some other part of this house.
Maybe she wants to be close to him and his art. Do you know what I mean? And this is all she has left of him.
That groovy Afghan.
Oh. Have you ever had to stay in someone's house and they give you one of those and you're like, this is freezing?
Yeah.
These little holes.
It's full of holes.
Full holes.
They don't hold heat very well.
No. They are beautiful in the very 70s. I'm surprised there are no God's Eyes, the other 70s artwork. The yarn wrapped around sticks.
Yeah.
Everybody had their home. Or styrofoam cup lamps was another big one, too.
The people on the walls aren't doing anything good for her mental state either.
No, not at all. This has another slow insanity is another favorite of our movies. I've noticed too. It's like because people slowly lose their minds when surrounded by the supernatural or the hint of the supernatural.
I thought that was Vivi.
No, it was me. We'll have to edit that stomach noise out. This is the first appearance of the bloody eyes that will... Obviously, if you've seen the most famous poster art for this, it's very much in the art.
That was another interesting story about when I talked to Mariana about this. I was talking to her. She wanted to know how she would be depicted visually in the magazine. I was like, well, on the cover, I was going to put the poster from Messiah of Evil with your image on it. She's like, oh no, don't use that. I hate that. It's not me. And I said, it is you. And she's like, no, it's not me. It doesn't look like me. And I had no idea what she was talking about. Then I realized there is another poster with a woman with bleeding eyes, and it's not Marianne.
Yeah.
So that must be the one she saw.
It's funny because now most Hollywood posters are Photoshopped. They're always photos and not painting. And I wonder if like some of that was the fact that the back and forth of getting rights to people's faces was,
Yeah.
actors were, we always say, well, we miss those posters. I'm sure agents don't miss those posters because the back and forth had to be nightmarish. Yeah, if you had that huge bed, let's maybe sleep in the huge bed. Maybe
Well,
maybe she's not ready to sleep next to Joy Bang just yet.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm cool with sleeping with you, but not ready to be part of this. What's the next level? Quadad.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Well, now it's a triad.
We're back to a throuple. Yeah.
Yeah, back to throuple.
There's a vacancy in their little shindig.
Yeah.
Nobody in town knows him. I don't know where else he'd go.
Arletty, I think you should leave here.
That's a great idea. Why don't you both leave? Then maybe I could get a little sleep.
They made her go sleep on the swing.
That's what's funny is that, like, the other women that Thom likes are very sophisticated, right? And they're, like, very mysterious and dark. And then there's just Joy Bang is, like, maybe 16. Do you know what I mean? She's, and kind of tomboyish.
Well, when Willard and Gloria discussed this part with Linda, they told her that they wanted her to look like a boy. They asked her if she would cut her hair short, and they were like, we want to make you look like a boy. It's going to be like Performance, the film Performance.
One of my favorite movies, yeah.
And that was what they wanted for this role here.
Well, that makes sense because like that movie obviously was amongst the circle, like art students at that point. I assume would be really big. They discussed in Nightmare USA that they were in school with Paul Schrader at the same time, and he had been kicked out and was campaigning to get back into class. And they thought that it was funny that he became a pretty big deal, and they said people already had the taste to realize he maybe shouldn't have been in art school, so they even made fun of him in that article.
That's an interesting scene that I wanted to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
We just saw a figure looking in that elaborate window, which is another one of my favorite things about this movie is that window. But it looks like Anitra Ford.
Yeah, I've always wondered that myself.
Is she one of them now? Like, because that's a zombie-ish thing that is not established in this film.
Yeah.
With any of our leads, like we never see any of the leads return as zombies.
Or is it like the ghost of her, or like her hanging over the proceedings as she's gone now?
The first time I watched this, I thought eventually we would see Laura as one of them.
That's a very Romero storytelling thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, somebody that we're already invested in has to become a zombie in it, and that never happens in this film.
This gets back to the idea of art being destructive and destroying its creator.
I don't think that piece he was building was really worth it.
Yeah, I don't think it was good. It just doesn't work.
What was he saying?
What was this? I would like to have heard his artist speech before he gives it. I was at a gallery show once, and this guy gave a long speech about his work, and it was just a big wooden penis. That's all it was, but it was like a 20-minute thing, and then he pulled the sheet off and like literally had to hold myself from laughing. It was like being in a 60s movie.
His is like a playground or a construction site. Like, well, there's a fence and there's a tube and...
They would all be rebuilt to look like Pointe Dune. Entirely normal. Quiet. Silent, though.
That looks like a painting there.
I know it's hiding now beneath its...
Yeah, the color choices. This is obviously... I'm predisposed towards shot on film movies because they have that like soft darkness I always talk about. But this movie has beautiful like colors within it. Like, especially look at this scene. Like, there's this. That's kind of neat because there's a juxtaposition of the male and female colors of pink and blue in the background of her, especially if she's supposed to be some tomboyish or boyish girl. That's kind of an interesting color choice.
Yeah. She's not a good singer, but she's sincere.
Yeah.
Tom's really mean to her here. She starts telling this story about her dad dying, and he just is ignoring her.
He's like, yeah, I'm going to listen to this reel-to-reel thing here now. I have this theory about Thumb that where he's kind of, in the same way he's a collector of legends and perhaps an art collector, he's also a collector of experiences and lovers, where once he's kind of collected them, he kind of gives up on them. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like moving on to the next ones.
He gets tired easy.
Yeah. At some point, he gave the same attention to her as he gave to the other girls. Do you know what I mean? That she was his conquest at some point, and now he's kind of moved past it.
I heard this noise the other end of the house. Sounded like somebody crying. I looked all over, but I didn't see nobody.
Like at this point, she's like, I looked all over the house and I heard someone crying, but there's no one there, so I just went back to my room. Like,
She's not alarmed by that.
No. I mean, you're in a town where people are disappearing and going away, and everybody's kind of on edge. And there's a girl that's nonstop crying already hanging out with you.
Then you two can be alone together.
It was daytime a minute ago, and
Yeah.
now it's dark. Maybe she just has the curtains closed.
I think her world's always dark. She's like all the girls in high school that I was in love with, all like proto as goth as you could be in 1987, 1988. All we had was The Cure then. And in Elwood City, a very small town. And I was like, that girl seems sad all the time. Her artist dad disappeared and was crushed by a canoe. I must connect with her.
She's not alarmed by that either.
No. This goes to my final theory about this film, Bill, that this is yet another interconnected town. I know I've talked to you about this a million times, but there's so many like small towns filled with menace, particularly on the coastline. And those towns would be Antonio Bay from The Fog, Santa Mira from Halloween 3, Potter's Bluff from Dead and Buried, Asatroth from Wamora, which this movie
Astaroth.
Astaroth. I always say it wrong. Yeah, I feel that's right next door. That's like next exit past here, And even in Providencetown from Tough Guys Don't Dance, there's a story within that movie about fires on the beach and them luring people to the beach for their ceremonies, the witches of Providencetown. But it's very much, I think it's interesting that these, like, I always think of Hollywood types as like big city types, and the fear for them are these small towns where they don't know what's happening within them. There's this menace within these small towns. I think you can put Children of the Corn into that same kind of world too.
Usually it's zombies.
Yeah.
Could be something else. But Dead and Buried especially, because they're zombies, but they're not like, Romero zombies.
Yeah. I don't want to give away Dead and Buried. Dead and Buried has my favorite twist on zombies, actually. It's a really great twist, and with twists within twists. But that, again, there's the shot that you love again right there.
Yeah, but now it's somebody else out there.
Yeah. It's very 20s and 30s German film Nosferatu looking, doing with like the shadow play and whatnot within these. That's a great line. Pale hands are the mark of a decadent life. I think that's the other hallmark of these movies where there's some, I don't even want to say authority, but some other controlling this town. I think of all the scenes in this movie, Bill, correct, this is the most edited, not by the creators, right? That this kind of has a lot of, the producers kind of added some pieces to this.
I don't think so.
The movie on the screen is added by the producers.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's actually a Western that they owned the rights to. I have it here.
Featuring Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah, featuring Sammy Davis Jr. It is Gone with the West. And there's just some library music playing over it.
All that for her.
Yeah.
The outside of the theater is one real location, and this is, of course, another real theater, but it's not the same one. I guess they set up to shoot in that one we just saw on the outside, and it was too wide. And the walls were too far apart, and they couldn't light it properly, and they wasted an entire day trying to shoot in there, and they couldn't. So they found this other one.
And you can see for a split second Gloria in the ticket booth.
Yeah, I meant to bring that up. That's Gloria Katz in the ticket booth.
And Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye, the movie that's on the outside, is a film noir that ends with a nuclear device going off and signaling the end of the world. It's a pretty intense movie. This movie has another marquee in a different movie, correct? In Annie Hall.
Right.
Yeah, doesn't Messiah of Evil appear in what other movie? There's another with House of Exorcism, both on the
Yeah.
It was maybe the third or fourth time I saw this that I realized that was Sammy Davis Jr. in this. Because it's kind of disconcerting that he shows up as he's a pretty major, obviously at this time, a huge star. And he shows up within this movie.
I think at the time he was still married to My Brit, star of Haunts.
Yes. I love the scene because it is much like the other one. It's like a gradual build towards what happens. And also lost in the power of cinema. Not that this appears to be the best movie ever made, but
it doesn't even really matter what the film is on the screen. I think it works.
Yeah.
Because it's so bizarre. Like you don't even really know. Like, is she watching a trailer? Is she watching the actual movie? We mentioned earlier how reminiscent this is of The Birds. This was the scene we were talking about. And this is also one of the things that gets talked about most when people mention Messiah of Evil is the theater scene. It's just so well done. I love how all the ghouls look blue.
And I think what's interesting, and just like the grocery store scene, like there is danger, and we're seeing the danger build up, but the character in danger doesn't perceive it at all until obviously it's way too late. Doors are locked, or they're in the wrong position. Do you know what I mean? They've been drawn into these places of consumerism or these places of American enjoyment, and then it's too late.
It's her endless box of popcorn. She's been eating it. It's not that big. She's never stopped putting popcorn in her mouth. And when she stands up in a second, you'll see there is still popcorn in there that gets dumped out. Maybe that's the only thing they had in the budget for catering.
Yeah. It was one of those things like at the start of this day, she's like, great, I get to eat popcorn all day. And after about 8 hours of eating popcorn, she's like, I don't know if I can ever eat popcorn again.
One thing that's strange about the editing of this film is we just saw a scene where the audio was fire, a burning fire. It's sort of like this desolate thing that like sneaks in. And then at the end, like right here, like all you hear is that desolate sound of burning as her situation becomes more and more dire. Now there's a creepy old man and a creepy woman sitting next to her.
I think post-COVID, this scene is even more frightening to be at a theater with these people sitting this close to you. I really like her acting in this scene. It's really understated. This is a very pantomime scene, but it really works.
She's very good here. Mm-hmm. It's very scary, and a lot of it is because of how she reacts to this. See?
There's a lot of popcorn in that box. I love her flares too.
She borrowed those from Sally, Texas Chainsaw.
Yes. It's astounding that Chainsaw is like within a year of this movie too. Like these kind of movies were all happening at once in the early 70s.
I love that one.
There's some great sound design here too. Did you see Uncle Spooky? He's in this for a second.
His big scene still hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. It's a really great death scene there. With like again not seeing anything but cutting through the emptiness as somebody dies within it.
They gave you a little blood in that scene. It's interesting that this movie it ended up being sold as sort of like a grindhouse thing. And we said earlier it's more of an art film.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still got those audiences. And there were these moments that the filmmakers gave them to hang on, sort of. But it wasn't their intention. And it's certainly not what they told, the actors. They didn't really sell it to the actors this way or have them act as if they were in a low budget horror movie. And Mariana was kind of taken by surprise by that element. And years later, somebody approached her and they were like, "Oh, did you see Messiah of Evil?" And she's never seen the movie. She's never watched it, which I can't imagine that, working on something and not knowing how it turned out. But she said, "Oh, Mariana," someone told her, "Mariana, I went to see Messiah of Evil and it's got zombies eating out of a refrigerator." And she said, "Oh no, that's not the movie we made."
Well, I think it would be more grindhouse if it's missing nudity for this time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there's a little hint of nudity.
The Joy Bang scene, there's a little.
Anitra shows a little skin too,
Yeah,
when she comes out of the bathroom,
but not like. I'm thinking it gets maybe more post Deep Throat, like mid 70s. Like there was a way to compete. It's always the Roger Corman, like we need something for the foreign investors.
Yeah,
which is his excuse to just have wall to wall nudity for a couple. of minutes.
Sure, yeah, it hadn't become so staple.
At his point. Theory: every 10 minutes, someone needs to get killed or naked
or be naked.
Yeah, or a giant worm unleash on somebody.
All of the above sounds great to me.
This is an interesting thing here because we've set up the two characters have been killed in situations where people start to pop out of the woodwork, and it kind of sets you up that you think that Tom could be next. These people are kind of coming for him here, so I like that. Spoiler, but that this isn't his fate.
Well, he doesn't really react to it the way the other characters do.
Or is he the the master of these people?
Well, it portrays him otherwise because he's kind of cowering from the violence that happens. So it could be that he's not entirely aware.
A Dr. Jekyll kind of thing. The other really interesting thing is there's a lot of major brands that show up in here. Beyond Rouse, there was just a JCPenney sign, which it may not seem to you today, but 1971 was a major retailer. And This was before when you had to get permission to use logos and and get their names within the movies.
It's almost a mannequin movie.
Yeah, almost so close.
Prominently featured in the background as a statement about inhumanity. Look, he could be human.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh. What happened to her?
She started messing with his collar. She's like, "Pop that collar, Tom."
He just shook her off.
Yeah.
The camera's tilted here, but you can't really tell right away.
Little Dutch angle, as they say. I always preach this. Like, it doesn't cost a lot of money to switch your camera angles. And it doesn't, you know what I mean, to play with the viewer's perception. Especially how she kind of appears. You think that she's coming towards the camera, but really, we're seeing her reflection. Like, for low-budget movies that happen today, you can still do that, and it doesn't cost you anything to frame things like that. It makes your movie better. More mannequins, though. This is... What percentage of a movie must have mannequins to be a full mannequin movie? 25%?
Oh, at least, I'd say, like 35. Somebody who's still human.
You've got to help. We only live a couple blocks from here. We were watching TV when we heard them. They came crashing through the sliding glass door, making that noise, that awful noise. We tried to get
What is the awful noise that they make?
I've wondered that, too.
after them like sharks.
Like sharks. The noise of sharks.
Oh. So they roar.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We learned in Jaws 4 that a shark roars.
And can swim through fresh and salt water. The other thing I think pushes this above, not that there isn't great acting in grindhouse movies, but the acting in this movie is almost universally really good. Like, she's great for this little role that she's in. She's incredibly believable, and like the interaction between them has a lot of like real feeling to it. It doesn't feel like, when you can see someone's like, I'm acting sad, like, or I'm acting afraid. Like, it feels. He's really great though too. Like, I think he elevates everything he's in this. Early cutting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She has issues she's working out.
I definitely would have dated her. Daddy issues, cutting, good hair. Soundtrack works really well. Just to randomly throw up bugs. That's the other side effect of living there.
Some lizards, too.
Can you imagine if you threw up a lizard?
Worms.
I mean, at that point, you thought that one in the Poltergeist movie was bad, throwing up the worm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather throw up the worm than all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's just so much of it in there,
Yeah. That's why my stomach was upset.
It's like she was eating what the dog was eating.
Yeah. I guess another movie I could it's a larger town, but the 70s Invasion of the Body Snatchers is kind of like that feel too.
Well, you already mentioned Santa Mira.
Yeah.
It is definitely Body Snatchers because, look, this guy just got taken over, and so did the woman that he ran into on the street, and Mariana is starting to transform. Yeah, see, Tom's just sort of like hiding and witnessing all this. He's distressed.
He's getting to collect a whole bunch of legends firsthand this time. It's almost like he's running into one of the paintings that are in the, in the house.
It's like the town and the Bat people.
Yeah.
Consistently deserted.
Except during the day, there were all sorts of people driving around during the day, but they probably couldn't get any deserted locations for day shots.
That's really the only scene that we get that alludes to the fact that this is happening everywhere in this little town. Here's Royal Dano.
I really love that it's taken this long of the movie to tease him and who he is, and now he finally arrives.
One of the bodies they killed up on the beach, but you still didn't leave. There's little time left. You'll have to go. Tell people on the outside. Warn them that what happened 100 years ago is happening again.
What?
Listen. Please listen.
We have a little bit of exposition here now.
Yeah.
Finally. Well, maybe this is a good time to talk about the aborted ending.
Yeah.
There's a whole sequence that was scripted but not shot because apparently one of the investors wasn't actually paying anybody, and finally somebody showed up to shut the shoot down, and because they found all the bills that they sent this guy stuffed in a drawer. And he wasn't actually paying anyone that was working on it, so they just stopped the production. And Mariana told me, she was like, they called me and they just said, don't come to work today because we can't pay you anymore. And she was like, I don't understand. She was like, that had never happened to me before, so I didn't know what to do. I just sort of just left.
And that's just the end of the movie at that
yeah.
point. Yeah.
So yeah, they didn't actually shoot the ending of the film, which would have spelled out that Tom was sort of like the incarnation of the Messiah of evil that they've been alluding to all this time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one glimpse of Mariana. She's all dressed up she was going to be a sacrifice to this being, and they didn't obviously finish shooting it. They didn't use it, so you never really know that. But the ambiguity works very well. Anyway,
it's also interesting because he tells her to go out and warn the world of what's happening here, but then later she says that people are escaping from there into the rest of the world to spread the virus. Do you know what I mean? The knowledge of it and knowing about it, which is very Lovecraftian, you knowing about these things makes it worse. You know what I mean? And you're going to spread this out into the rest of the world. And as that knowledge happens, it moves out through the world.
The area of influence is getting greater.
It's like if Professor Zarkov hadn't discovered manga, Ming wouldn't have targeted Earth.
It's got to be destroyed before the moon turns blood red, and he returns to lead them up the coast and inland into the city. They did this to me.
So he's kind of fighting his, I guess, new zombie nature here.
Yeah.
To try to warn her away. This is what eventually happens to everybody as they deteriorate.
Well, the implication is that she can't get away, and he says to her, "You'll have to go." But it's not that easy. See, he's still an artist, even to the end.
Yeah. Early Blue Man Group member.
Uncle Spooky's cameo.
Yeah, Uncle Spooky, yeah. He really goes all out in this performance, though, with the paint throwing, everything. It's pretty great.
Everything he had, he put into this scene. This is his only scene in the film.
Yeah.
On camera, anyway.
We'll go home.
I already tasted human flesh.
She's murder with those scissors.
Yeah.
She does that again later.
And in another movie, maybe she's involved with some scissors.
What movie is that?
Oh, I'm thinking
Schizoid.
Schizoid, yeah.
I thought you meant she stabbed
No,
somebody with
but
scissors.
she's in another scissor-related movie.
Yeah.
Another letterbox list idea: movies with scissors. Scissors.
You mentioned Murder at Love House earlier. Yeah. She has a death scene in that film.
Yeah. She's the ghost bedeviling Robert Wagner in that.
Oh, no comment.
Yeah. Earlier it said you're going to have to burn him, not just kill him. And you know what? To get a burn effect is not a cheap, or easy stunt to get in your movie.
A full body burn.
Yeah. One of my friends just got certified to do that, and he posted his pictures of his last class of his full body burn. I'm like, I don't even know if I would do that.
Well, do they even need to do it anymore? I mean, now that...
That's what I asked him. He's like, yeah, but it's fun. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh. Your friend has some strange kicks.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions about this movie is, are these trees that are inside there real?
Mm.
They're potted, but I don't know how they could be real and there's no light in there.
Yeah.
At least, probably not enough to maintain the life of a tree.
Yeah. He didn't really react to that at all. Like if I walked into someone's house and there was a dead dad there, I probably would scream.
This just like roasted body. Imagine what that smells like.
Mm. The sizzler. Did you set your dad on fire? You love that chandelier though, right?
I love everything about this movie. Even the fact that it's unfinished.
He started this movie with a harem, and he is not ending it with a harem.
Yeah. Things went downhill rapidly for Tom.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a cheerful room. Suddenly it's the bride.
Yeah. The creators of this movie went on to do, obviously we talked about that they came back in time to do American Graffiti, but they did a ton of other movies. Temple of Doom is probably, I'd say, their best known film. Indiana Jones and
the Temple of Doom, yeah.
One of the movies that led to the PG-13 rating. And then there's some uncredited work on Star Wars, on scripting for that. And then kind of their career takes a dip with Best Defense.
Best Defense was their first wrong move.
Yeah, and that's one of the first Eddie Murphy movies.
Yeah.
Dudley Moore and Eddie Murphy had a cameo, but I remember that like when the poster for that came out, he was like dead center coming out of the tank in that poster. And I remember that was the first reviews of it where this really isn't an Eddie Murphy movie, it's a Dudley Moore movie. And then obviously the major wrong move is they kind of took most of the flack for Howard the Duck, which an early Marvel movie, but doesn't really seem like it. And that's also really considered the first like George Lucas misstep as well.
Yeah, he had just built the Skywalker Ranch, and he needed to make a whole bunch of money fast to pay for it. and that was what he came up with. He was putting together this project, this film of Howard the Duck, and he entrusted it to Willard Huck, and well, it didn't quite work out the way he wanted.
It's funny because I think as the years have gone on, time has been a little kinder to Howard the Duck. I've seen some people kind of reappraise it. It's still not obviously a great movie. It's got some really nice special effects, but it's an almost impossible movie to make based on the comics that were out. Like the comics are so satirical, and do you know what I mean? And then it's obviously a product. It's a character that decries product being turned into a product, so it really doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then Radioland Murders is really the last thing that they did with Lucas.
Don't you hate it when someone starts telling you about their dream and they won't stop?
Oh. It's like there's that unspoken language when you talk to people and you're like, how's your day? And everybody should just say good.
Yeah.
Right? Or like, it's going all right. And then that's it. But when
you pick one thing and you talk about it.
Or they go, oh, so bad. And you're like, oh, no. Why did I ask how their day was?
Yeah.
So anytime people are like, I had a dream. And I'm like, oh, my God, I have to go to the bathroom.
I'm going to have to remember that one.
Yeah. Always, or just feign that, like, my other trick is, I used to do this on dates before I got married again. I would set my alarm for 15 minutes into any date. So it would sound like my phone was ringing. And then that way it got me out of these conversations. Like, oh my gosh, I have an emergency just came up. I'm not proud of this. This is, I know you love this scene here where finally those windows start to get broken and that like world that's been created here starts to get destroyed.
We've been waiting for it.
Kind of Little Night of the Living Dead here too, near the end of it. Finally, the supernatural breaks through this world.
Their sanctuary is invaded by zombies.
Mm-hmm.
She's got some fight in her.
Yeah.
Well, she stabbed the shit out of Tom.
Ooh.
That's gotta hurt.
Yeah. Like,
she's a good one too.
Yeah. You throw her onto that swing.
Should never stop.
They eat their own though, unlike most zombies. So I guess that's a way to get away with it, right?
That is very strange. I'm glad you pointed that out. You don't often see that.
I can't really think of any other time I've ever seen that. I love the music cues that are happening here as they run down the beach. Usually when you're running hand in hand down the beach is usually the happiest part of a movie.
The love scene.
The love scene. And this is definitely not. Stephen Thrower in Nightmare USA said that this movie feels like it exists in the same world as The Child, which I think you might agree with. That it's like very much like these like weird worlds of, I guess, would you consider this folk horror?
It could be.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have the aesthetic of a folk horror film, but I don't know. Maybe it is about a local legend, and
yeah,
there's something going on in a very small town.
It's play on TV, like in any syndication packages.
Curiously, no.
You would think because of its near public domain status that it would.
Right. It did not get any, because I had never seen this movie until maybe like probably like mid 90s or like 97, 98, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And I had to order a bootleg because nobody had put it out, or at least I had never found it.
I first started noticing it like on when the Mill Creek kind of, the compilation DVDs started coming out where, get 50 horror movies for.
Yeah.
And it's funny because if so many of the movies are usually on those are very rote and, what you expect. And this movie stands out amongst them. And this is, like you said before, an example of like, how do you make an ending out of what you're left with?
This is something I probably wouldn't do as an actor. Is get into the water under a pier.
Yeah.
Well, that's where people fish off the pier, and there's all kinds of like, possible sharks lurking around.
The
there.
last movie I watched with you where somebody bloody jumped off a pier is a strange ending of a movie that I won't spoil.
Oh, right, yeah. That was a bridge.
Yeah. This scene of her just suddenly being alone in the middle of the ocean is pretty frightening too. That's kind of like one of my childhood nightmares of swimming out and then everybody you know is gone and you're stuck in the middle of just no horizon around you.
Oh, I was so terrified when I saw Open Water.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That movie really got, especially since it was true.
Yeah.
You know?
This shot's beautiful because, like, she is really out there as the camera pulls back. Like, you know what I mean? That she's pretty far out.
The last thing I saw was the setting sun.
It's neat the juxtaposition between blue and red there is now we kind of go into the darkness.
They had pulled me from the water. They had
And she's kind of inherited her father's skill as a painter now to depict whatever. I guess, is there art therapy in the zombie world of that they've put her into?
There is in this one.
Yeah.
Here's another thing that you can't tell. We're seeing her from the side because the other half of her face was disfigured. That was part of the ending that they never shot. She was gonna, you know how they did it to her father too. They messed up part of his face, and that was what they did to her when they let her go. Is they disfigured part of her face, and it was just that one side.
And that's Michael Greer there, right? Coming out of the water.
I mean, I can tell that it's Michael Greer.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's not that obvious. Now she's in Stevens Sanitarium with Dr. Stevens is allowing her to live out her fantasy.
So that's another question. Could you appreciate this movie as this is all within her head and this is the fantasy that she's lived and that this world doesn't exist?
Sure.
Yeah.
An early role for Charles Bronson. Not really.
Little montage here at the end of getting everything we saw back into the movie.
During the day, they let me out from the entrance. We sit in the sun.
This is one of my other nightmares, to be in a place like this, knowing that you think that you're sane, but nobody on your side, spitting up bugs.
The nightmare is you're not insane. The
Yeah.
5th floor.
The more frightening for me than it should be. I love this shot, by the way. The way that the movie bookends with this moment of being trapped within this hallway of blurry darkness and light.
This tunnel into whatever lies beyond. She's able to come back and forth. Our harbinger of doom.
Now she's spreading the sickness to everybody.
They'll take you one by one, and no one will hear you scream.
Funny that no one will hear you scream. And then Walter Hill's in this, and the tagline for Alien is, "In space, no one will hear you scream." There we go. How odd that the first credit is for the music, I guess.
Yeah.
That maybe speaks to how important the music was to the film. You have been watching Messiah of Evil.
We'll see if there's anybody we forgot to mention.
There's Walter Hill.
The credits.
B.W.L. Norton. Oh, the lighting was done by Stephen Katz, who is obviously the brother of one of the creators.
Gloria Katz.
Yeah, Gloria Katz's brother. Stunts Unlimited did the stunts. That's who did the burn set. And that's Hal Needham's group, who did Cannonball Run, the director. That's the group that he formed.
Right on.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. That was Messiah of Evil. Hope you guys liked it, and I think we should suggest, if anyone has suggestions for another film that you'd like to see us cover, as long as it's public domain, we would be amenable to that.
That's not too much to ask, is it? It has to be public domain.
I mean, if you want us to come to your house and sit with you and watch a movie with you and talk over it, we'll certainly do that too.
We'll make it available on our Patreon.
Yeah. For $500, Bill and I will come to your house, get super high, and talk over movies.
Okay, we'll take 200.
If you just give us.
You have to have the weed there.
You
already.
have the weed there, we'll come.
Follow us on Facebook. My page is Groovy Doom.
Yeah.
Sam has his own website.
Yeah, B&S, Bands About Movies, B&S About Movies.
And we have a weekly web show called the Drive-In Asylum Double Feature. It streams live, usually every Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time.
And you can see past episodes on the same YouTube channel.
Yeah. So there you go. Thanks a lot for listening. You could say.
I was enjoy the show.
Now the show's over.
Yeah.